Welcome to the Jungle ASEAN Military Edition. Alright everybody, welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving headfirst into the fascinating world of Southeast Asian geopolitics. We're talking military might, strategic alliances, and who's got the biggest boomsticks in the region. Now, when most people think of global military powers, they think of the usual suspects: the United States, Russia, China, maybe a sprinkle of North Korea, for that added bit of will they, won't they nuclear drama. But what about the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, better known as ASEAN? This diverse group of nations is right in the middle of some of the most important shipping lanes in the world, not to mention a whole lot of natural resources. So, yeah, you could say their military game is kind of a big deal. So, buckle up because we're about to break down the military strengths and weaknesses of each ASEAN member. We'll separate the hawks from the doves, the Davids from the Goliaths, and maybe, just maybe, learn a thing or two about a part of the world that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Let's do this. First up, we've got Indonesia, the reigning heavyweight champ of Southeast Asian military power. And when I say heavyweight, I mean it literally. They've got the largest population in ASEAN, which translates to a whole lot of potential soldiers. But it's not just about numbers, people. Indonesia's got geography on its side too. We're talking about a sprawling archipelago smack dab in the middle of vital sea lanes. Control those waterways, and you control the flow of trade. It's like owning the only toll booth on a very busy highway. Now, Indonesia's military hasn't always been top-notch. They've had their fair share of aging equipment and internal struggles. But lately, they've been on a shopping spree, picking up fancy new fighter jets, warships, and submarines. It's like they walked into a military Macy's and said, "We'll take one of everything." And they're not just buying shiny new toys either. Indonesia's been stepping up its military exercises, both solo and with international partners. They're sending a clear message. We're not just here to look pretty, we're ready to throw down if we have to. But don't get me wrong, Indonesia's not out there trying to pick fights. They're all about that peaceful coexistence thing. But in a region as strategically important as Southeast Asia, sometimes you gotta flex a little muscle to keep the peace. And trust me, Indonesia's got the muscles to do it. Next up, we've got Vietnam, a country that knows a thing or two about punching above its weight class. They've tangled with superpowers before, and let's just say they didn't come out of it looking like the underdog. See, Vietnam's got this whole never-back-down attitude forged in the fires of, well, a lot of wars. They've got experience, they've got grit, and they've got a coastline that's just begging to be defended. Think about it, long coastline, mountainous terrain. It's like Mother Nature designed Vietnam to be a military obstacle course. And the Vietnamese military? They're the ones setting the course record. They've been investing heavily in their navy, particularly their submarine fleet. Now, submarines might seem a little niche, but trust me, they're the ultimate come-at-me-bro of the ocean. You don't mess with a country that has a bunch of underwater ninjas lurking just off your coast. But it's not all sunshine and torpedoes for Vietnam. Their equipment is still pretty outdated compared to some of their neighbors. It's like they're showing up to a gunfight with a really well-maintained slingshot. And then there's the budget. Let's just say Vietnam isn't exactly swimming in cash. They've got to be strategic with their spending, which means prioritizing quality over quantity. But hey, they've made it work before, and something tells me they'll find a way to make it work again. Now let's talk about Thailand, the land of smiles, delicious food, and a surprisingly well-equipped military. Seriously, these guys have got more tanks than some European countries, and you know what they say? You can never have too many tanks. Thailand's military has undergone some serious modernization over the years. They've been snapping up new fighter jets, upgrading their tanks, and even dabbling in some homegrown defense technology. It's like they're trying to become the Silicon Valley of Southeast Asian military tech. But it's not all about the hardware. Thailand's military is also known for its humanitarian efforts. They're often the first on the scene after natural disasters, providing aid and assistance to those in need. It's like they're the friendly neighborhood superhero of Southeast Asia. However, there's one little thing that throws a wrench in the gears: political instability. Thailand has seen its fair share of coups and political unrest over the years, which can make it tricky to maintain a consistent defense strategy. It's like trying to build a house on a foundation of jelly. You never know when it's all going to come crumbling down. But despite the political roller coaster, Thailand's military remains a force to be reckoned with. They're professional, they're well-equipped, and they're always down for a good military parade. Next up, we've got Singapore, the tiny island nation that could conquer the world? Okay, maybe not conquer the world, but they could definitely put up a good fight. See, Singapore might be small, but they're like the overachiever of Southeast Asia. They've got a highly advanced military, equipped with some of the most cutting-edge technology money can buy. We're talking top-of-the-line fighter jets, drones that can practically fly themselves, and a navy that's the envy of much larger countries. And they've got another secret weapon mandatory military service. That's right, in Singapore, every citizen has to serve their country. It's like jury duty, but instead of deciding someone's fate, you're learning how to fire a rocket launcher. This combination of advanced technology and a highly trained population means that Singapore is basically a walking, talking fortress. They're like the Switzerland of Southeast Asia, but with way more firepower. But even a military powerhouse like Singapore has its weaknesses. Their biggest one? Geography. When your entire country is basically one giant city, you're pretty vulnerable to supply chain disruptions. Imagine if someone cut off your Amazon Prime deliveries. Now imagine that instead of books and toilet paper, it's food, water, and ammunition. Yeah, not ideal. So, while Singapore might have the most technologically advanced military in the region, they're also acutely aware of their limitations. It's a delicate balancing act, but one that they've managed to pull off with their usual efficiency. Now let's talk about the Philippines, a country with a long and complicated history with, well, everyone. They've been colonized by the Spanish, occupied by the Japanese, and were even a United States territory for a hot minute. It's like the entire world decided to have a potluck in the Philippines and everyone brought their baggage. But all that history has taught the Philippines a valuable lesson. You gotta be able to defend yourself. And lately they've been on a mission to do just that. They've been working hard to modernize their military, buying new ships, upgrading their aircraft, and even investing in cybersecurity. It's like they're trying to create a real-life version of that movie Hackers, but with less floppy disks and more missiles. But there's one major obstacle standing in their way: money, or rather the lack thereof. The Philippines has a lot of competing priorities: education, healthcare, infrastructure, the usual things governments have to worry about, so they've had to get creative. They've been partnering with other countries, like the United States, Japan, and even India, to get access to better equipment and training. It's like they're playing the military equivalent of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but instead of calling a friend, they're calling in favors from global superpowers. And then there's the whole South China Sea dispute. The Philippines is right in the middle of that territorial tug-of-war, which means they've got to be prepared for anything. It's like trying to enjoy a picnic in the middle of a territorial dog park. You never know when things are going to get messy. Now, things get a little complicated when we talk about Myanmar. They've got a large and experienced army, hardened by years of internal conflict. These guys aren't afraid of a fight, that's for sure. But here's the thing. Myanmar's military is also the root cause of a lot of the country's problems. They've been accused of human rights abuses, ethnic cleansing, and basically turning the country into their own personal playground. It's like that friend who always insists on playing Monopoly but then changes all the rules to make sure they win. Not cool, Myanmar, not cool. And all of this has consequences. International sanctions have crippled their economy, making it harder for them to buy new equipment or even maintain what they already have. It's like trying to keep a vintage car running when you can't afford spare parts. The internal conflicts and human rights abuses have also made it difficult to attract foreign partners. Who wants to be friends with the kid who's always starting fights on the playground? So, while Myanmar might have a large and experienced army, they're also facing a whole host of challenges. It's a classic case of quantity over quality, and in the long run it's not a sustainable strategy. Last but not least, we've got Malaysia, the often overlooked middle child of Southeast Asian military power. They're not the biggest, they're not the flashiest, but they're quietly getting the job done. Malaysia's military is like that reliable friend who's always down to help you move, even though you know they'd rather be doing anything else. They're not going to brag about it, they're not going to ask for anything in return, they're just going to show up and do what needs to be done. They've got a solid track record in low-intensity conflicts, like fighting pirates and insurgents, and they've been stepping up their game in maritime security, which is kind of a big deal when you're surrounded by water. But like a lot of countries on this list, Malaysia has to make do with a limited budget. They can't afford to buy the latest and greatest military tech, so they've got to be smart about their spending. They've been focusing on upgrading their existing equipment and investing in training and simulations. It's like they're the DIY enthusiasts of the military world, finding creative ways to stay competitive without breaking the bank. And while Malaysia might not be a military powerhouse, they're a valuable partner in the region. They're not aligned with any one bloc or alliance, which means they can work with pretty much anyone. It's like they're the Switzerland of Southeast Asia, but with less neutrality and more delicious food. So there you have it, folks. A crash course in the wild world of ASEAN military power. From Indonesia's growing might to Singapore's technological prowess, each country brings its own unique flavor to the table. It's a complex and ever-changing landscape with no easy answers. If you enjoyed this breakdown of ASEAN military strength, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Who surprised you most? What country do you think will lead in 2030? Stay tuned for more deep dives into global geopolitics.